Hello, everybody. This is Rebel News episode number 3, and today with me here I have Daniel Anjos,
Hello.
or Daniel Anjos, whatever is preferred,
Hmm.
who is actually a team lead of our JRebel tooling team, which is in charge of all the IDE plugins for JRebel and also the license server. And today we are going to talk about JRebel for virtual servers and remote machines. And Daniel is going to show us a few demos, how to set it up and what are the caveats and how to use it. So hello, Daniel.
Hello, hello. So here I have the initial page describing remote servers. So the basic idea here is that you want to use JRebel, but your server is not running on your local machine. And so you are with this tool, you are able to send your changes directly to the server, to the JRebel server running in a different machine, as long as you have internet access to that machine, like over the HTTP protocol. And for example, what you need to do, like this is basically explaining the functionality, and you need to install the IDE plugin in your favorite IDE, Eclipse, IntelliJ, or NetBeans, and do some basic configuration there on your project, and some server configuration. Maybe let's go first on the IntelliJ side. So you need to have a valid license, and once you
The
have
valid
the
license should the valid license be on your own machine, or should it be on the remote machine?
on your own machine,
Okay.
in this setup, you need the IDE to be running and to have with the IDE plugin installed. And if you have a valid license, the remote icon will be green, meaning like you can remotely synchronize your project with the remote server.
All right.
So
But by remote machine, do we mean like physical server, or we also mean like a virtual machine or a Docker container?
yeah, we also promote this feature for a virtual machine, a machine that is not directly accessible from your project in your file system. So it could be a Docker machine, it could be another kind of virtual machine running even in your own computer, but in a way that's not directly accessible through your file system. So in that way, remote is the better way to do the reloading of your classes.
Okay. And so you have a basic project here. Can you explain
Yeah,
what it is?
it's just a web app, a simple Java EE application. There's a servlet here with some very simple output, some index JSP, some index HTML. So, most of our users do work with web projects. So, this feature works better in that world. That's why we use the HTTP protocol. But if you're doing something that's not web, it's also possible to have a configuration that works for your project. So if you have a web project, the JRebel will be running together with your project and listening to requests. And we have our own secret protocol that will be sending your changes. So I have my project here. I enable JRebel for it. I have in the JRebel panel that shows here on the left side corner all your projects, and you just have to click to configure JRebel for your project. And
so that one generates a file, right?
Yes. Once you click here, we will evaluate your project and generate a file called Rebel XML that contains the basic configuration for reloading your application either locally or with remote. So here, the Rebel XML just describes that your classes are compiled to this folder, target classes, here, users, and also you have resources that are not compiled, but they are available when they change in this path, source main web app. So this configuration makes it so that the classes that you change will be detected by your ID in this folder, and the other resources will all be detected on this web entry. And if you're running JRebel locally, they will be detected and reloaded. And if you're running remote, they'll be sent to the remote machine for reloading.
So the ID plugin will actually use that file to locate which files it should synchronize, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
And when you enable the second column here, you are telling the IDE that this is a remote project. You to create a Rebel remote XML file that only contains the an ID of the project that it's used if you have multiple projects running on the same server to identify where does this reload happens, how to match those classes, because you could have multiple projects running with different Rebel XML configurations.
Or maybe something like a multi-module Maven project, right?
Yes, or maybe you're changing just one dependency. There is a jar, so that jar could be identified with this ID. We auto-generate it based on the project name, but you can change it here. And once you did this, and you configured your remote server location on the JRebel configuration, here you go to JRebel and remote servers. Currently, I'm just giving a localhost example. So my remote server is not remote, but is running in my local machine. But it could be on any address, including localhost if you had Docker or some other like endpoint. And once you configure it, let me just do a trick. You can test to see if the machine is accessible and the remote server is running with JRebel properly. So there's this test here. If it works, it works. And then there's the server-side configuration. That's also very simple. If you already use JRebel, it's very similar. The only thing you have to do is when you're starting your server with JRebel, you have to add one extra flag here. In this case, remoting plugin true. So here we started Tomcat with Java agent JRebel.jar and Rebel remoting plugin true. That makes the server start with JRebel in the remote mode. He'll be listening to the remote requests.
That is actually cool. Then you don't have to open any ports extra to what you have. So if your local server is running on localhost 8080, then it will be just communicating to 8080 and you don't have to open anything else.
Yeah, and or over HTTPS, if your server is like configured to restrict only access to some specific ports, JRebel will be running over this same protocol that you have. So if you have access to the server, it should work. As long as your machine has like proper access to the server. Sometimes you have to set up proxies because your browser might have some proxy settings, but your IDE may have different settings. So you just have to make sure that those are properly set up if the connection is non-trivial. But as long as you can access it, then it should work.
Nice.
And then, for instance, this Tomcat that I started, it's here on this other browser window. Let me show here. I started the Tomcat, localhost 880, and I deployed this application that was the sample, some hello world. If I click on the servlet, it shows me this value. And the theory is now I can just go to this hello servlet and say sample application JRebel, or maybe even better, servlet page. That's the title. Let me just put like JRebel at context path. So I save it, and in IntelliJ you have to compile so that the changes are like you have IntelliJ has autosave, but it doesn't have autocompile.
No, it does. It usually is turned off, but you can actually turn it on settings.
Exactly. So by default, it is disabled. So you can enable it as well. I haven't done it just to have how it works by default. In Eclipse, for instance, you don't have autosave by default. So as long as immediately when you save, the IDE plugin will, the Eclipse will compile the class, and the IDE will listen to the compilation and send these changes to the server. So if I go back here to the servlet, and yes, here on the top, servlet hello servlet with JRebel at context path blah blah blah.
Nice. Do you see anything in the log when it synchronizes? It usually should print something as well, right?
Yeah, we have the JRebel console. This is some new feature we have for a couple of releases already. Let me hide this thingy. It shows like some, depending on how you set up your IDE log level, it shows the steps about connecting to a server, making the connection, pushing the file, synchronizing, and then no failure. Then he'll say, okay, all fine, and he will show just here on the bottom that synchronized with success. So you can keep track of all your changes here on the console, or if you know that is working, you can just save it and check the changes in your application. So
nice.
This was a class. It compiled to the target folder, and one other thing we can do as well is to change resources. Let me see if the resource is loaded properly before. It should have a resource here called, yeah, welcome my friend. But this is coming, yeah. Yeah, it's showing here the image and the welcome my friend. This welcome my friend is being loaded here on the servlet by this get 18n blah blah blah. He loads the resource bundle, and he gets the string that's here on the welcome my friend. So welcome to JRebel. So let me see if the changes are saved. Yeah, this is a interesting gotcha. And for instance, here are the web app. If you open again the Rebel, he's listening to the resources changes on the source main web app. If I go back to this index XML or the index JSP pages that we had there, let me go over here. So yeah, this is the index XML, HTML, and I go to the JSP page, and I have just another JSP. Let me go back here to the JSP file. This is like hello, hello. So I can do any kind of other changes, and it should also apply here. Yeah, so here on the bottom part. So some like reloading resources might not look fancy because they are, some other applications do that as well, depending on how you start your application, your Tomcat. But this is all done remotely, so you can, if you are doing some kind of JavaScript front end and some Java backend, you could also reload the JavaScript part from this side.
I see. I also noticed that you didn't actually use that button, and currently the synchronization is happening like automatically. I guess it's configurable, right?
Yeah. So this is something that we also have. Like, if you open the configure module, like in your project configurations, you're gonna have the JRebel, and you will have there is a way to configure it so that you have to press the button to sync every time. But by default, the synchronization is this auto synchronization is enabled, meaning that if the IDE detects the changes, he'll push the changes based on this configuration here on the Rebel XML file.
I see. Oh, nice. It's like how you actually work. What is your workflow, right? If you want to batch multiple changes, for instance, you are changing a class file, and then the changes require you to change something else, then probably you don't want to synchronize it right away. But once you've done all the changes that you currently are working on, and then you want to test it, you can push the synchronize button and then check it out, right?
Let me see it here. It should be yeah. Here on the remote service tab, you have the synchronize on build flag. Yeah, so if he notes any build changes, then he will send the values. But you can disable that as well.
I see.
And this is some basic example, but we can and running on localhost. But I also have another example running on Amazon. I remember in one of the geek outs that I've attended, it was a nice demo about the cloud service from IBM, I think, and it was very nice because she was like doing live coding, but then let me see, open recent, this Spring Clinic, and this window. But yeah, so she compiled, she saved, and she said, now I just have to redeploy the application. And it was a couple of minutes until she like pushed the changes to the source control, and then the thing detected the changes and created the deployment package. So that was quite interesting. Because I wanted to raise my hand and tell her like, hey, have you tried JRebel remote? Because, for instance, here I have Spring Pet Clinic running on Amazon Cloud, like some IP that we have running. It's normal.
It's our standard demo application.
Yes, and it's fairly complex, like not very complex, but shows a couple of interesting use cases that clients might have. And here I also have configured the Spring Pet Clinic, both the Rebel XML and the remote. They will be on your source main resources folder, like both the Rebel XML and the remote. I deploy this application once to the cloud with the proper parameters, like with the proper files inside the OR and the proper startup of the Tomcat. And now if I do any changes, for instance, like one simple change that I usually do is to go to the crash controller. Currently, he's showing this like controller used to showcase blah, blah, with JRebel in the end. And she did also a very like, and is also she just did a quick change like this, and then took a while until these changes were applied to the server. But with the JRebel remote, you see on the console log here, he's pushing the files that it changed, and then nothing failed. So no showing any notification because we already know that it works, and I should be able to see it also here with JRebel, and it's awesome. So everything in this case works exactly as it would be working locally. So if you're like doing your application and you're like in the middle of a session, like doing a query, and you want to change something specific to this page, you could go there, change it, go back, and see the results immediately. You don't have to. You don't lose the context of your application, like where you were, in which page you are, the session, or anything. So
yeah, and if the connection, the internet connection is fast enough, then you will not see any hiccups actually, right?
Yeah.
So the internet connection is the biggest kind of open question here, right? So if your internet connection is bad, then probably the synchronization will be a little slower. But since we are synchronizing not the full project, but just that file that has changed.
Yep, only the changes that are needed.
It's like a big penalty.
Yes.
Right.
So
nice.
if you're doing anything in the cloud, or if you're doing anything on virtual machines, I totally recommend giving a try. Get the trial and see how it works, because from that quick demo that the IBM Cloud was showing, it would have saved 5-10 minutes of the audience just to show how it worked.
Yeah, like if you have the access to JVM parameters on any cloud service where you run your server actually, then you should be able to just install JRebel, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just like the -Java agent and one -D that you have to add.
It's just one configuration on the startup of your server. If you go to the documentation here on the server configuration, he'll explain like basically, you just have to pass the path to JRebel and the remote thing enabled through. And there's like several ways to do it in different, like here we have the command line options, or which files you should configure for many of the Java servers, almost all the Java servers that you're running, like in this JRebel standalone. If we go on JRebel agent, you're gonna probably find here running servers from command line. You can have here like Geronimo, GWT, Google App Engine, Maven. So if your server is based on any of those, you can just take a look at how the configuration is set up. Like sometimes you have to change some configuration files. Sometimes you just add some Java options to the command line, and that's all.
Cool stuff. I actually find this and one extra parameter quite useful for the cases where you don't run inside the application server. So, for instance, if you're just developing a command line application that just starts and runs, some kind of a netty server, for instance, or a daemon process, right? So you can actually specify a port like -d rebel dot what is it like?
Let me
Remoting
find it
port?
here. Yeah. Let me see here. Using a dedicated port.
Yeah, remoting port.
Remote port.
And then it actually starts a jetty inside the running process, right? Oh yeah, it's written in the documentation as well. So it starts a jetty container, and then it will be able to communicate with the IDE plugin, and then you still would be able to use that. Like we have actually a big huge client whose developers are actually developing some front end applications that are normal web applications, and then we have they have like a big group of developers who are developing the backend services, and those backend services aren't actually running inside a container. So they actually require that remoting port to be specified in order to use that. So for them, it's like a huge feature. So that they would be able to update those remotely running services like with our remoting plugin without having to redeploy or waiting for the build to complete and so on. That's really nice.
Yep.
All right. Nice stuff. So we have covered everything, I think. If you haven't tried JRebel remoting and you are using virtual machines, remote servers, or even Docker container, probably we should have a dedicated episode on Docker, how to use JRebel with Docker container. We'll think about that and probably set up the next episode on that one. But if you are using one of those, you probably want to try JRebel with its remote feature.